Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our event this morning, which is the launch of our third annual Future Skills Report, Bridging the Skills Gaps in a Rapidly Evolving Sector. My name's Claire Tunley. I'm the Chief Executive of the Financial Services Skills Commission, and it's our report we're launching today. It's really great to see so many people join us. We've actually had to extend the number of registrations available twice because it's been so popular. So certainly proving to be a hot topic amongst the industry, and shows the importance of talent, skills, and the agenda that we're talking about today. Just over 4 years ago, the Financial Services Skills Task Force launched their final report that identified the really urgent need for the sector to invest in skills, and that skills investment wasn't keeping pace with the changing skills needs that the sector was facing. They were involving at a rapid rate, tech and digitization really driving some of that change, but also about behaviours that were important to the future of the sector. The report at that time, 4 years ago, called on the industry to boost their efforts on skills. And this led to the creation of the Commission, which we have today. It's an industry-led body. We have over 40 firms in membership. We started with 15. So clearly some of the work we're doing is very valuable. And we provide insights to the industry and practical tools to help firms develop their own skills journey and really forecast and identify what skills they'll need in the future to remain competitive, and then how to build those themselves. And it's great to see so many of our members on this call this morning, and some non-members. So if you're not a member and you're thinking about joining, do let me know and we can have a conversation. When we set up all that time ago, one of the first things we did was look at skills forecasting. You cannot build skills if you don't know what skills you've got and what skills you will need in the future. And we built a toolkit to help firms do that. But the data that we then ask our member firms to share back with us gives us real insights into those skills needs that the sector's facing. And it comes directly from firms and their own work on forecasting their skills needs. We're now producing our third annual report on skills needs of the sector. So our understanding of what the sector needs has really matured over recent years. And we have a very good idea of how skills needs are shifting over time. And you'll hear more about that this morning. This year, for the first time, we're able to share data on proficiency gaps. This is because of our partnership with EY and their data that they've shared with us. And we've triangulated with our member data and other sources such as ONS and ONS data. But what this all does is give us a greater detail of where skills gaps are and where firms need to put efforts to close skills gaps. Not all skills gaps are the same. And I have to say, it's not all about more training. Lots of people say we want more training. More training is good, but it's much more about getting the right training to the right people at the right time for businesses' needs. We know that skills gaps remain prevalent. You will hear more about that, but it's also clear that firms are taking really positive steps to close skills gaps as they pivot towards adopting AI, looking towards net zero as well. And there's real effort involved in forecasting at a greater depth and greater detail, skills becoming much more of a topic of conversation regularly at the most senior level, at board level, but also firms doing more reskilling, deep reskilling of individuals. So before we start, I would urge you all to download the report that's available on our website and do share it. It's available and it's there for discussion. It's meant to be useful. Do also share our posts on LinkedIn, on social media, to spread the message. We are recording the session, so this will be available online later if you have colleagues that maybe didn't manage to make it. And we do have a really interesting panel coming up, so do submit questions using the Q&A function because we do want to get your thoughts and insights and questions to the panelists around the data and what firms are doing about this. I'd like to express my huge thanks to the team at the Commission, particularly Katarina Erhardt, who's led the development of this report, but the whole team. We're very small, so we do pull together. And also huge thanks to EY and Lloyds Bank, who have been really supporting us on this report, and all of the members at the Commission, because every firm who submitted data has contributed to this outlook. We've got a packed agenda, so I am going to move on, and I'm going to introduce Frank Bowley, who's the head of the unit for future skills, which is part of the Department for Education. And Frank's going to talk a little bit about AI, the impact on skills, some of the work that they've done, and some of the insights from government. So Frank, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I have some slides. Where they're coming up. First of all, can I just say thank the commission? I've got too many F's and S's to say it quickly. The acronym. We've been doing some work on AI, and it's been really useful. And I thank you very much to invite me to today's session. I've glanced through the report, haven't read it all, and it's extremely useful, and I do commend it to people. What I've been asked to do, what I'd like to do, is talk about AI skills. We did some work on AI. This is the Unit for Future Skills, which is a small team within DFE looking at AI. We published something last year. I'm not going to talk about that because actually that gets featured in some of the report later on. So I'm going to have a higher look about AI skills in general, and share some thoughts with you. And reflect on some of the discussions we've been having with people in the financial sector and other industries. Really, as I said, this is really useful to share it with you because I think the financial sector will be really much at the forefront of a lot of the developments in AI. The report we looked at, which picked up financial services as really the vanguard of AI change, but also obviously financial services are terribly important for the economy. So getting this right will be terribly important. Can I have the next slide, please? The main thing I was going to say on AI is I'm often asked, what do I think the skills we should invest in now so we can take part of AI? And part of our job is to answer that question. And I've been answering it sort of very vaguely for the last year. It's amazing that ChatGPT only came out a year ago, and it's been such a topic of conversation for this year. I've been asked many times what we think AI is internally and externally, and at the moment it's extremely hard to tell exactly what the skills are we need. I mean, if you look at a typical sort of adoption curve, which you have on the right-hand side, it's really we know that eventually AI is going to have a really profound impact on the economy, jobs, and skills. I don't think anyone doubts that. And there's lots of research that's come out, including our own, which suggests that about half the jobs in the economy are going to be significantly affected by AI. And differently from a lot of the work on automation and this sort of developments over the last century or so, a lot of that's going to be the high-skilled, high-wage professionals. So we're going to see great change. But what is unclear at the moment is how quickly that change is going to happen, and what actually is exactly the jobs change is going to be. And if we go to the next slide, ONS did some surveys a bit last year, and what they found was that at the moment about 4 in 5 firms have had no actual exposure to AI. They haven't adopted any, and they also are not really expecting to adopt any in the next 3 months, which admittedly is a small amount of time. But there's no last year there was no planning for that. This is the latest data I found. It might change a bit, but my experience of chatting to people is that's about right. And there's a small amount of firms are trying out various bits of AI. And if you go to the next slide, please, and you can see that, as you'd expect with AI, that varies across the economy. There's certain sectors of AI like ICT, education, professional services, where we do see much more use of AI technology. And when in our conversations with the financial sector, I mean, AI is such a broad technology, but things like machine learning and data analytics, which is clearly part of it, that's been a feature of financial services for many years. And some of this technology has existed around before ChatGPT and large language models. And there's starting to be experiments with things like chatbots, for instance, as well. But when you look at the whole economy, it does seem at the moment we are very much in the beginning of that sort of adoption area, and it's areas where there is niches of change, but no sort of widespread change. And go back to the next slide, please. So, I mean, it's really clear for me we are somewhere on those first 2 areas, that innovation segment or early adopters. If anything, it feels like we're very much very much in the foothills of our changes to AI. And as all these curves, we don't really know exactly when we are going to reach that period where we see the majority actually using AI, and actually a pretty clear sense about the direction of AI is going to go in. And as I said, this is, and I really get this feeling when I chat to firms. There's certain projects going on at the moment, but they are niche and yet to be expanded. So firms don't really know exactly how AI is going to use, and they really, it's going to take time to integrate AI into their business operations and really think about what skills they actually need to use AI. So the question really is not to say exactly what AI is going to be, but to be in a position where how can we prepare for AI in a position where actually it is unclear exactly the direction it's going to be, but we are certain there is going to be significant change, and also there's fairly certain that change is going to as preparing for that change has to start now if we are going to be ready for that inflection point where AI technology really takes off. Can I go to the next slide, please? So in that area where we have uncertainty, but a sort of sense that preparation has to start now, what sort of steps could we start taking and thinking about how we prepare for AI? I mean, the first one is to invest in low regret skills, which is quite clear that we really need now, but also it's fairly certain that we will need in an AI technology world. I mean, there's a range of those. There was a team within a sort of board within in DFE called the Skills Productivity Board, which brought a number of academics together, and they did a report probably about 2 years ago. I commend it to people to look at about current and future skills needs in the UK, and they also commissioned some horizon scanning, I think, by the Rank organisation. And they identified skills, for instance, data, communication, and areas like that. And that's clearly, we need those skills now. We need more data, people aware of data. We need people good at art. Those soft skills about empathy and communication. But those are clearly going to become more important in the AI world. AI awareness is also going to be important. Exactly what that means, I'm not sure, but people know that AI is coming and how it's going to be used. The one thing I didn't put down there and I should have done is it's really quite clear, I think, over the lifetime of people's sort of working, if people go to the labour market now and work for the next 30, 40 years, what they're going to do is going to change, and they have to be prepared, and businesses will have to be prepared to actually learn new skills as well. So teaching people how to learn is going to be really important as well. I think skills planning, and Claire mentioned this, is something which we will have to do more. I do think businesses in general aren't very good at skills planning and forecasting, and a lot of the time it's the sense that there's a skill shortage, and there's a look to government and colleges and other areas saying, where are the skills we need? And then often there's a competition for the remaining people who have those skills. So I do think where we can actually, both government and business, get better is in skills planning and forecasting. And I know there's more about that in the report. DFE is going to do our bit to help there. We're about to publish a report on forecasting internally, and we have commissioned a new job forecast, which is with the National Federation of Education Research and Warwick University, which is about to be published and will be available on our dashboards. But also, I think we should think about how businesses can do it. Can I have the next slide, please? One thing I think which may be useful is, and I can discuss this later on, is DFE and Unit Future Skills is building something called a skills taxonomy. Some people may have come across this in the US. It's something called ONET, where we break down jobs, and this will be all 3,000 so jobs that ONS defines in its 6-digit SOC code. If anyone knows what that means, a bit niche. And that will break those jobs into the tasks involved with those jobs and the skills needed for those jobs. And it will use a common language for those. So it will allow people to compare jobs between sectors and between companies. And I think that will be really useful and potentially transformational in round skills planning, identifying new skills, designing training, because we can speak with people like IFATE and trainers about skills using a common language. But also, and this will be important for things like green skills and AI, when people have to move jobs, either within firms or across between firms, this will allow people to identify career pathways much easier and identify skills needs. Prototype of that should be ready sort of in the autumn time. Exactly when it will be published, I expect before the end of the year, and we'll have a few full version of that later on. But also, I think, as well as skills planning, it's important that businesses do and government invest in skills as well. Could I have the next slide, please? This is some work which was published a couple of months ago around the Employer Skills Survey. And this is a survey about 70,000 firms asking how much money firms, how much time firms spend actually investing in their own skills. And you can see this is total investment by the sector. I had a quick chat with some people, and obviously people can look at this but total invested per trainee or per person. This is the overall spend. The trend overall spend or investment per capital is about the same. And what you can see is that the investment of businesses overall over the last 10, 15 years has been down. I think that's a problem both in the number of skills in the economy, but also flexible training is much better done by private organizations. Financial services is shown as red, and that's been going down roughly on average. The very good thing about financial services is between 2017 and 2022, that has changed, and we're seeing much more investment there, probably partly due to the apprenticeships, but also hopefully more of the training, and we hope that continues. And the final thing as well as investment is working with government as well. I think one area I think is really important government that I'm asking businesses to work with is in organisations like IFATE, who are the ones that define occupational standards and help define, thank you, the actually what is taught. This is a very complicated slide. I won't go into it. But IFATE are doing a lot of work at the moment trying to improve the agility of the standards so they react more quickly to skills needs, and that will be important when we see skills changing. They're going to use lots of data, new data sources, including UFS, you can see in that left-hand side. But we do need to have input of organisations to IFATE so we can make sure the standards are kept. There's obviously another thing just to mention quickly, and then I'll take any questions on Claire, is on the DSIT are about to launch a new pilot for AI skills training. It's a £7 million programme, so we will need to spend lots more on AI, but this is trying to get to see what works. So I encourage people to look out for that launch in the next few weeks, and it's aimed at business services and professional services firms, SMEs. So this hopefully will include some of the people on this call. So feel free to apply as well. That's my slides done with. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Frank. Really helpful to get an overview of where you see it and where the government's going with this. Just before I let you go, it'd be really good to, well, first of all, great, thanks for showing the figures on investment in training. It's something that we look a lot at, and it's great to see the uptick with financial services, which may coincide with the creation of the Commission, but couldn't possibly comment. But one of the things that comes up a lot is around the dialogue between industry and government, and actually how can we get more of the business voice and the skills needs of industry into government. And we obviously talk regularly with you and your team, but how can we get more of that industry collaboration with government? Is it around the skills taxonomy, which I think a lot of people will be interested in how that develops? Some of the things that DSIT you mentioned, and we know about engagement with IFATE and apprenticeships, but how can we get that collaboration to be a little bit more impactful?
I'm smiling slightly because we have the same conversations about how can we get business engagement, and there's a huge amount of discussion in DFE about getting more business engagement in there. And we realise lots of businesses have lots of other things to do. So it's a question of how can we do those areas. I think there's 3 areas spring to mind. First of all, there's been an exercise on local skills improvement plans, and they were published last year, and they were led often by British Chambers of Commerce, but there were a lot of areas trying to encourage businesses to be part of those and work with local colleges and in their area, universities. The second thing is a lot of task forces have been set up at the moment, digital computing task forces, AI task forces. So do look out for those and communicate. But more generally, I do think areas like IFATE and government in general, we have set up organisations like, say, IFATE, where it is looking for business involvement. So sort of apply to get on task forces, work with people like yourselves. So we have the best business voice, and we know like AI, we actually have real examples of where we can actually see where business is going and learn from it. My final one is, and this is a personal plea, is we've had discussions with financial services where there's actually a real case study where people would like to share it with us and get involved so we can see directions people will involve in. Please let us know and we can sit down with you. I suggest you to go to Claire or the FSSC, they'll be better at that, or ourselves. If you Google Unit for Future Skills, you can find our contact details there.
Lovely, thank you, Frank. And we've got a question from the audience just about the name of the AI skills pilot. It's the flexible
skills
AI.
I think it's
flexible
AI Flexible Skills Fund. If you put that in Google, you will find that one. But I can send it.
Yeah, we will try and find the link and put it in the audience chat before the end of the session.
And the taxonomy, sorry, and I know you must move on. On the taxonomy, the prototype will come out in end of the year. One reason we haven't talked about taxonomy a lot is it's an extremely abstract thing, and until we actually have something people can see, I tried to find a graphic that showed it. I'm not sure my NSA works. Until we have a graphic and see, it's very hard to explain it. But when this comes out, I'm very keen, again, if people want to contact us either now or later on, and actually show it to people, talk about it, and actually see how it can be used.
Yeah. We will definitely be talking about it with our members, so we'll keep the conversation going. Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you very much for your insights. I'm now going to hand over to Katerina Earhart, who's our Policy and Research Manager at the Commission, to take us through the main findings of today's report. And again, just a reminder, it is available on the website at the moment. So over to Katerina.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be sharing the findings from the report. The data is based on ONS data, data from our member survey, where 25 members participated, more than ever before, and also data from EY and 8-Fold AI, as mentioned before. All the data on the graphs on these slides is available in the report, but I'm also available for any questions. And I'm going to start with an overview of the economic landscape and the recruitment landscape, which saw both stability and change in 2023. Compared to 2022, the pressure on recruitment has eased. So we've come down from that record high of vacancies that we had in the summer of 2022. But about 3 in 100 roles in financial services still remain unfilled. Among those roles that were hard to fill in 2022, the same roles remain hard to fill in 2023. So that was data, software, cyber, and risk roles. And product managers have joined that hard to fill category for the first time. And this seems to be linked to strong demand for front office roles last year. And we use that recruitment data as an indication of skills demand, but I'm going to show you more around demand and supply chain for skills on the next slide. You can see on the left the 13 skills that we have identified in the Future Skills Framework. And we've asked our members around how demand and supply for those skills has changed in the last year. The data showed that demand for all but one of these skills is growing faster than supply, data being the only exception here. And that means that the demand for technical skills is around 20 percentage points ahead of the supply. Demand for technical skills has always been high. It remains high, but it's leveled off slightly compared to the previous year. On the contrary, for behaviors, we've seen a real increase in demand, particularly for empathy and coaching. And that means that the demand for behaviors has now overtaken demand for technical skills. And the gap here is about 25 percentage points. So it's bigger than for technical skills. And that demand for empathy and coaching really seems to be driven by that ongoing need for people leadership skills and that our sector's focus on customers. And now to go into a little bit more depth, I'm going to share the proficiency data. So as mentioned, this is a really unique data set. It's based on data from 50 firms and a sample of 13,000 profiles. It's not existed before. And what it shows us is where we might have a supply of relevant skills, but not at the right proficiency level, so that we still have a gap overall that we need to address and how those gaps are different. What stands out from the slide is that the biggest gaps are in data analytics and insights, and also in coaching. For those skills, we have a 15% gap between the average proficiency of people in those roles who hold those skills compared to where they would need to be. As closely followed by relationship management. And then what also stands out is there are other skills where the number of people needing upskilling is actually bigger. So if we look at teamwork or empathy, the size of that bubble signifies that there's a lot of people here who have that skill, but they have a gap. So all of them will need upskilling. The gap's around 7%. And then at the bottom of the chart, we can see the more specialist skills. So for machine learning, UX, and cyber, the proficiency gaps are low because the specialists in those roles are highly proficient, but there are very few of them. So the supply of those roles and people in those roles still remains critical for the future of our sector. Positively, we can see that the number of our firms who identify proficiency levels has gone up massively from 38% 2 years ago to 65% last year. But the skills demands and skills gaps are not static. They are subject to change. They change in line with wider trends in the economy and society. And this brings me to our data on AI. The data from the Unit for Future Skills shows that our sector is set to be more exposed than any other sector. If we look at the AI occupational exposure score, financial services has a score of 1.1 compared to 0.2 across all industries. And some of the roles that are set to be particularly affected are those that have a really high volume of roles in our sector. So they're really crucial, and they include finance analysts, financial services managers and directors, account managers, project managers, and many more. As you can see, they are all highly skilled occupations that could be significantly affected, and that reverses previous trends where those roles were largely insulated. So up to now, we've often talked about the impact of technological change on customer services roles or administrative and secretarial roles, but really the impact of AI is not limited to those roles, and we'll need to think about what this means for the roles in our sector. And it shows clearly that we need to upskill our existing workforce, but we also need to think about how to attract and retain the right talent. When we look at it from a gender perspective, we can see that a growing number of women are entering professional and managerial jobs, so those defined as highly skilled jobs. Apologies. But most of these roles remain male-dominated. So as you can see on the graph on the right, all of the highly skilled roles, except for insurance underwriters, are male-dominated. Positively, more women were hired in financial services last year, although they make up a lower share of the applicant pool. And this seems to be for two reasons. The first is we can see the positive impact of firms really working really hard to redress the balance with programs directed specifically at women, for example, at women in tech, and they're bringing more women into highly skilled roles. At the same time, many of the applications from women still seem to be concentrated in the lower medium skill jobs where the turnover is higher and the competition is lower. If we look at the early career pipeline, we can notice that the number of apprentices entering our sector has declined over time. The number of apprentices in highly skilled roles has increased, so that is a positive trend, but in terms of numbers, it's gone down. And for graduates, while the numbers have remained relatively steady of graduates entering financial services, if we look at the trend more widely, we've now got a lower share of graduates entering financial services, only 4% compared to 8% about 20 years ago. And that really shows we need to think about what we need to do to attract and retain the right talent. And that brings me to showing a few examples of what our firms are already doing in this space. More of our firms are forecasting skills needs, and they're doing it in more sophisticated ways, collecting more data points. The total number of learning hours are increasing. So employees in our member firms now get on average 4 days of learning per year compared to 3 days last year. So it's been increasing. Non-mandatory learning has been increasing among that, which is particularly positive. And more of our members are reskilling. 71% of our members were actively reskilling people in roles that are at risk of being outdated last year, compared to only 50% the year before. And the number of people reskilling across our being reskilled across our membership has also doubled. And we can particularly see that reflected in the increase in data analytics skills, where 83% of our members have seen supply increase. There's more detail on how our member firms are building skills in the case studies that are featured in our report, and we're going to hear more about those on the panel as well. So this leaves me with sharing our call for action. As you can see from the data I've shared, our sector is making really important progress, but more remains to be done. And that's particularly around building skills proficiency. We've organized our call for action along 4 pillars, and this all resonates with the work that we've shared in November in our People and Technology report. So we've got something that's really key is making skills central to business strategy. At the moment, 58% of our members discuss skills at board level at least quarterly. And that's really key for having that conversation. Secondly, we need to foster clarity on skills needs. So those are the questions about forecasting, proficiency, and so on. We need to work out to create and build the skills we need through upskilling and reskilling, but also recruiting and retaining talent. And lastly, we need to collaborate. We need to work together to find solutions that work for our sector. Thank you. With that, I'm going to say a big thank you to Julian for driving the slides, and I'm going to hand over to Mark Hoven.
Good morning, and I'm Mark Hoven. I chair the commission, and we're now moving to a Q&A session. So I've got a great group of panelists here. I've got Sarah Allen, the Director of Learning for Aviva, Cameron Bowie, who is the Head of Global Financial Data at M&G, Duncan Rennell, who is the Director of Learning at Lloyds Bank Group, David Story, who's a partner at EY and has worked very closely with us since the task force was originally launched over about 6 years ago, and Sandra Wright, who's the Head of Organisational and Strategic Workforce Design at NatWest, a title that's longer than the name of the commission. It's a bit of a mouthful, Sandra, to talk about. So what we want to do is, I've got some questions for the panelists. There is scope in the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen to feed some questions in, and I'll try and do a blend of questions from the audience and some questions that we've already prepared for and thought about. But perhaps, David, I'm going to start off with you. So, as Catherine said, the big change in terms of this report and the data is the proficiency work that EY has been leading on. Can you just say a bit more about how those proficiency gaps have been identified, and so how you've gone through that methodology, but also then just how firms might use that data to help think about upskilling and reskilling.
Mark, so as Katerina said, I think we've always had the supply and demand data available, either through the membership survey itself or through labour market insight based on aggregate demand and supply data, how many people are applying for jobs, how many candidates are there, how quickly jobs are filled, etc., which is extrapolated from job boards. What we haven't had is proficiency data to understand really what do we currently have from the skill set inside firms. And in this perspective, we partnered with Eightfold, which we're very grateful for. They had a data set of over 50 firms, FS firms in the UK. And they based their data set on inference work that they've done across those firms, but including work experience, assessments, learning, project work, backlogs, etc., to come up with the insights. So what we did was we took demand and supply data, we then introduced the proficiency data, and we first of all applied that against a set of EY benchmarks that we have for roles across the financial services sector, and what are the required proficiency levels. We then looked at if there was a gap between the proficiency coming through the data set and those benchmarks. And as Katerina pointed out, there are gaps in quite a few places. We then applied not to everything, but just to the 13 future skills that the FSSC has already identified. Now, those come from members saying these are roles or skills which are hard to fill, and therefore they're challenges, and they continue to be challenges, and therefore we want to focus on those. And we asked the question, with this new data, could we better understand the why? Why would those have been chosen by our members? So we know they're important because our members have said so, but why are they important? And what we found was that there in fact are three distinct drivers. You get supply-driven challenges. So think about it as there's relatively small demand, something like cyber or machine learning. We don't have to fill many roles in this, but there aren't enough people for those roles. So even though, and they're critical roles for our businesses. So those would be supply-driven challenges. Demand-driven challenges would be when there is a lot of demand. There may be supply, it may be increasing, but it's outstripped by how demand is going. Software developers would be a good example there. And then there would be proficiency-driven challenges where you've got broadly a balance of supply and demand actually, but you're still finding it hard to find the right people. And that's because of proficiency issues. There aren't enough of the right people with the right skills or level of skills. Data scientists would be a good example over there in the market. So why is it important from an application and firm perspective? Because if you understand the reasons as to why you're struggling with a particular skill set, you can better fine-tune the solutions. And for the commission, right, at a supply level, if it's a supply challenge like cyber, those are the key ones we can collaborate on because we want to grow the market at an industry level. And to do that, you need to collaborate. Demand challenges are best probably attacked by growing the market at a firm level. And you can do that either through reskilling, or you could reduce demand by technology and automation. And then thirdly, on proficiency, that's really where your classic upskilling comes in, like around data or project management or other issues. So it just helps us start to take limited investment, which we have, and fine-tune it in terms of how we apply it against the critical skills challenges we've got. And that's really the benefit of the research that we've taken forward.
That's really helpful, David. Thank you for explaining that in more detail. I think it does then give us that opportunity, doesn't it, to think about that upskilling and reskilling challenges, and perhaps let me get to explore those in a bit more depth. Perhaps Duncan, I might turn to you first. From your perspective, from a firm's perspective, what are the areas where you find the most challenges in terms of the skills you need for future business development?
Good morning, everybody. So skills are absolutely integral to our business strategy. We're undertaking one of the biggest transformations in the industry at the moment, and every aspect of what we're doing, how we serve our customers, the new propositions that we want to create and so forth, and how we organise our roles and how we do change here are all powered by equipping our people with the right skills. So the results from the report are pretty consistent with the sorts of things that we're focusing on, whether it's data, tech, cybersecurity, how we do change, but equally on our sort of personal or behavioural skills, whether it's digital literacy, empathy, critical thinking, and customer centricity. The bit I just want to pull out, because we've got increasingly mature in how we do our demand and supply, as David was just suggesting. But I think the point around proficiency gap is really, really important. So you can easily get sort of taken in by some fairly binary data. And it's really, really important to think about relative proficiency levels and actually how good are people at the roles and the skills that we need them to do, because otherwise you can target interventions. And to Claire's point earlier, it's not about just about training, but you can quite easily miss the mark if you're not too careful. So understanding the skills that are needed, to what degree and what level of proficiency, and then asking the honest question of what do you actually have and how big is that gap, I think is really important to make sure you target and focus the work in the right areas.
So Duncan, could you just unpack a bit more about how at Lloyds you measure proficiency? So I think it's be something, it's a topic people are trying to grapple with. It'd be great to get your sense of how you're doing that measurement.
So we've done a lot of work last year, particularly around redefining our skills taxonomy, and as part of that, we've introduced Dreyfus as a proficiency scale across all of our roles. So at a role level, I think we're very clear about what's expected by skill. And then we're doing, through our strategic workforce planning, some top-down analysis based on some judgments and views made through our business leadership. But in target populations, particularly data and tech, we've done individual skills assessments. Now, we're definitely adopting progress over perfection, but it does give us some really helpful insight. When you look at things like software development, we have a view top-down, how proficient we are in certain languages and frameworks. But when you actually do the assessment at a colleague level and aggregate it up either through our CIOs or our platforms or our job families, it really helps us understand how far we've got to go. So we're definitely on a journey, but the work we did very much on an MVP basis last year is paying dividends in terms of focusing our finite investment on the skills that really matter. Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. I'll turn to Sandra and Cameron now, and just to think about a couple of skills areas. And Sandra, perhaps I'm going to start off with you. People may have been surprised when they saw our list of future skills that one of them that was in there was empathy. Yeah. And I know that NatWest, and there's a case study in the report, are focusing on that. Could you just talk a little bit about what you're doing to build empathy and what the link is, do you think, between empathy and driving business performance?
Sure. And hopefully I'll be able to respond to one of the questions that have come in the chat as well as I go through this. So in NatWest, we, and I might start with the performance piece first, Mark, and then turn to how we're doing it. So when we look at this within a NatWest context, what we're seeing is that empathy and building those empathy skills can drive performance probably in 5 key ways. The first of those is customer satisfaction. And we find that colleagues who are empathetic to our customers build greater satisfaction levels. They respond and understand customer needs much better. And that leads to improved customer satisfaction and loyalty. The next one then is relationship building. And by empathizing with our customers, we see that colleagues can build those stronger relationships with our customers overall. And that leads to that increased trust and retention, and also ensures that we deliver those fair customer outcomes to them as well. A third area that we're seeing is people who are empathetic and who have developed their empathy skills tend to be better problem solvers as well. They understand better, they respond quicker to develop resolutions, and that leads to an enhanced reputation. We also see that colleagues who have enhanced their empathy skills are better at resolving conflict, they're better at managing difficult situations as well. The fourth area that we've seen an increased performance is the whole area of innovation. And what we see is empathetic colleagues tend to be more likely to identify opportunities for whether that be product or service improvements and respond to that accordingly. And then the final bit that I would just touch on is the whole area of team collaboration. So we see that building empathy within the bank fosters that culture of collaboration, and collaboration is only ever a good thing. And that understanding amongst the colleagues, that leads to just better teamwork and productivity overall. What we see at NatWest is that overall customer experience, the empathy enhances the overall customer experience. It drives that loyalty and drives the positive business outcomes for the bank. So it's just a no-brainer for us. And I think to the question that was asked, has it been deprioritized? I don't think that's the case. I just think it hasn't been as evident, maybe, as it has more recently. And when you see what we do in NatWest, when you read the case study within the report, there's a number of ways that we try to build empathy for our colleagues, within our colleagues as a skill, that is. I'm not going to go through all of them because we don't have the time, so I do encourage everybody to read the report, but a few things I would touch on is, first of all, our Thrive Leadership Programme. So this is the programme that we offer to our leaders within the bank. And one of the core themes within that is empowering people. And what that is based on is developing our leaders, develop those or support their teams by developing the empathy, build trust within that. It helps colleagues to understand how perspective taking is so important as well, understanding where other people are coming from. Differentiating between empathy and sympathy as well is key to that. And what we see, the colleagues that go through that programme have much stronger relationships with their teams. They connect better with their own feelings, and they're able to make informed decisions and prioritise what's most important as well. One of the other areas to touch on in terms of how we do this within NatWest is leadership fundamentals, which is for our first line new line manager programs. And what we try to do through that program is help our leaders become much more self-aware about the type of leader that they are. And self-awareness, as we know, is really key to building that empathy. And we know that that creates a positive team environment, encourages inclusion and commitment and teamwork as well. And inclusion, I do want to pause on as well, because that's obviously one of our core values within the bank. And what we do is a significant amount of development for all colleagues on that. One of our key programs is called Choose to Challenge, and that's a real life set of examples that we have colleagues go through on a regular basis. 53,000 colleagues have gone through that at this point in time, and it's all about using real life examples to help colleagues get confident to call out non-inclusive and unacceptable behaviours as well. And I think just to point in, or to touch on some of the earlier conversation about AI, and maybe this really draws the point home in terms of why this is now such a big thing. We see that AI is going to be massive and massively transformative for our industry, and it's going to significantly impact on us. So those human skills, like empathy, become even more important in that context.
And Sandra, that's a really important point to which to end up, because I think when we're doing the interviews for the People and Technology report, is a very clear message from business leaders that to be successful going forward, you needed those strong interpersonal skills. If you're going to use the data the business has about its customers to deepen the relationship, you had to be empathetic. You have to build that strong customer relationship.
Yeah.
And that combination of interpersonal skills and tech skills, as well as industry knowledge, will equip leaders for the future. That's really helpful. Thank you very much. Cameron, we talk about data skills there. It's a big gap across the industry. Can you talk a little bit about what M&G is doing to tackle this? I can't hear you, Cameron. I don't know whether you got a different microphone option. Cameron, do you want to log off and come back in again? And I'll turn to Sarah to ask her a question. So, Sarah, we talk very positively about the programs we can deliver to colleagues. We talk about the need. Can you talk a bit about perhaps the flip side of this? What do you see as the challenges or the blockers to reskilling and upskilling that we need to address?
Yeah, of course. And so obviously we launched the Foundry at Aviva in January last year. For those that I haven't spoken about the Foundry 2, it's a digital reskilling program. It's our flagship initiative to develop 5 key digital skills that we know it's not actually even future skills, like we need them right now, right today. So but we've been really delivering that now for just over a year. And as we say, it's not without its challenges and blockers. So from my perspective, there are probably 3 main challenges that we came up against. One was balancing the long term with the short term view. So whilst we're very focused at Aviva on making sure that we're serving our customers, serving them well, being there for them in their times of need, I think reskilling is often seen as taking colleagues away from customers or away from revenue generating. So but you have to be able to balance that we're doing this for the longer term good of Aviva and the industry, and manage that balance, particularly with I guess leaders in the business. So that's definitely been one. The second one was perhaps not always having all the detail, and not letting that hold you back. So one of the other panel members suggested that taking that progress over perfection approach was really helpful. So just being clear on, right, what are our no regret 5 key digital skills that we know we want to develop more of? And they were things like UX designer, product owner, software engineer, software developers. And the third and final blocker is time. And we know that it's always the thing that is quoted as the biggest barrier to learning is not having the time. But from my perspective, we all have the time. It's just about your prioritization. So it's about whether that reskilling initiative or that learning initiative is prioritized, recognized, rewarded. And so for me, time should not be a barrier. It's maybe we need to deprioritize other stuff or reprioritize the reskilling and upskilling initiatives.
That's great. Thanks very much, Sarah. And I want to come back to that issue about time in a second. Cameron, hopefully this works.
Hopefully, yes.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So as I said, it turns out. Yeah, so I think the original question was around the recruitment challenge and how we're addressing that. So I think we're addressing it probably in three different ways, because we have our external recruitment approach, our internal upskilling approach, and then sort of cross-functional work that we're doing. So from an external perspective, clearly AI is coming, and we want to understand that better. So we have brought in external experts in that. So in the article that's within the report, we brought in quite a high-skilled academic in the field of AI to come in and really sort of help assess and bring those external viewpoints and see to what extent they can be applied to use cases within. And that's been a really useful exercise. It's also given as a good view in terms of what we need to get better at in order to better utilise more people like Quintus here when he came in. We've also started this year, the first year where we've taken on a graduate apprentice, and rather than simply going down an accountancy or an actuarial, a typical pathway, we're actually bringing them in on a data pathway, where they will be specifically put through data training, whether that's a postgraduate course or other specific learnings, really to build that data analytics. And hopefully he will be a pioneer, will bring in more in future years. And that person will be somebody who can then rotate around different teams and bring that extra insight with data analytics and encourage and share ideas within the teams and build critical mass, etc. From the internal perspective, we're doing quite a lot of upskilling and awareness training. Because I think, as somebody said earlier, nobody knows their process better than the people who are doing it currently. So rather than just parachuting in white coats to try and come and fix a problem, actually giving people some extra inspiration or enlightenment on the tools that are available, the type of improvement they could see if they brought in one technology over another, and how accessible some of these things are, rather than simply just being stuck within the confines and safety of Excel branching out a bit more, because the volume of data that we're dealing with is only increasing. The time we're given to report these numbers is only shrinking, and the complexity of regulations and controls is making it challenging. So we have to find smarter ways of doing this. And then the other one is just in terms of that general awareness, we're working out clear pathways that we're rolling out. So because not everyone will be on the same data and analytic journey, but making sure everybody's moving, rather than, again, just having that pocket of excellence somewhere and then hoping that people come. Actually giving people specific time, 2 hours a week, is what we're trying to encourage people to do in training. And then the final bit is getting better cross-functional. I'm sit within the finance function, and we could bring in some experts in data analytics. And would they be fully employed? Probably, but in actual fact, having a much more central function that we can dip into, and those ideas can also cross-pollinate across other parts of the business. That's also an important part of this jigsaw.
That's great, thank you. David, I'll just ask you quick questions. I know you've got to leave a second. And it's been touched on, and Cameron talked about there in terms of time, 2 hours a week. We talked about how you try and build in reskilling, upskilling. From your experience talking to clients, how are people trying to build that reskilling and upskilling into their workflows?
Well, Mark, I think it's a very in vogue topic at the moment. Learning in the flow of work. The premise is really that you're combining relevance, because you're in the flow of work. It's got to be related to what you're doing, to convenience, that you don't have to leave whatever platform or mode of work that you're in order to be able to learn. If you bring those two together, the theory is that there will be more opportunity to learn, and people will make use of that opportunity to a greater degree. It's exciting, but I think we've got a fair amount of way before most firms are going to be fully on track in that, and technology is at the heart of that. It's obviously only possible within a digital environment. So, for example, reskilling as such, outside of apprenticeship programs and formal shadowing programs, quite difficult. But upskilling is very useful. So what are we starting to see? We're starting to see much more investment in micro-learning content, because by its nature, you want small modules, little bursts, which are very applicable to something in the flow of work. So we're breaking up these kind of big content pieces and refining them to smaller micro-learning. I think you're going to see a lot of activity from applications we use with, Copilot, in Excel, etc. But lots of standard, supported applications out there. They are taking the time, the developers, to put in micro-learning there, so we're able to upskill ourselves very quickly within those. Within firms, we're starting to see forays into combining video, augmented reality modules, etc., with instructions or in generic processes, where, again, you don't have to leave. It could be as simple as a link in an email to remind you of something when you're about to do a process, or you've been asked to do something, to something more extreme. And of course, in our daily lives, a lot of electronic product providers, nowadays you don't get a manual. You might just get a QR code that you scan, and an AV comes up that allows you to do it. I think that with hybrid work, there is on one level there's a shift more to, even though the demand in hybrid work is actually for in-classroom, in-person learning, because it's a way of socially interacting with people. But from a firm perspective, there will be more of a digital approach. We can see more of that. I think there will be a review of the 70-20-10 rule, because that needs to shift and change within in-flow learning. But it's got to be complemented with classroom learning for highly targeted technical skills, where you come together for the critical ones that do make a difference on a collective basis. And then finally, I think firms are also getting smarter around the nudges and the way of motivating people. So things like badges, other ways in which you motivate people to participate and to make use of the opportunities which are there. We're seeing a lot more of that. But long way to go. We're all on a journey. I think the kind of Copilot type applications and AI is going to really accelerate it. And that augmentation that'll come from Copilot will both reduce what we have to learn, because we no longer need to. We can actually just use Copilot in that regard, but it's also going to make it much easier for us to learn it when we do need to learn it. So very exciting. I think we're going to see a big push in that regard over the next couple of years.
That's great. Thank you very much, David. Sandra, you were nodding there. Tell me about your experience, your perspective on how you you make work and learning sort of flow together well.
Yeah, and nodding because a lot of what David was saying, we really recognise within NatWest and are doing quite a bit of it as well. And I would 100% agree that technology will be at the heart of this, and that's just a continually evolving and developing landscape. Some of the things that we're doing, just to build on some of the points that David made there, some might think quite traditional actually. So on the job training, that hasn't gone away. That is something that features really strongly within NatWest, helping people develop the skills whilst they're working. The other thing, we drive for that continuous learning culture, and that's about really making sure the colleagues feel encouraged and empowered to acquire new skills, and that includes dedicating 2 days for every colleague on top of existing mandated learning, job-related learning and so forth, to develop those future skills. So not just what they need to do the job today, but what they need to work in the future as well. One of the other things that we employ really successfully within the bank is the use of gigs. And this is something that we launched a number of years ago, where we've got dedicated pieces of work, real problems, real projects, where we advertise them, so to speak, through our career hub for colleagues to come in and do that piece of work within an established team. So for example, in my own team, we welcomed someone in to do a gig on our proficiency levels for skills, as it happens, just last week. So using people to develop, it's a quid pro quo for everybody. They develop new skills, and the teams then benefit from different expertise and different perspective as well. And the other thing I think that never goes away as well is that feedback, that ongoing feedback and support loop. One of the things that we've done within the bank recently is relaunch and transform our performance management approach. And core to that is really strong feedback, not just in performance, but also in terms of how are you developing as a person and the skills that you're working towards as well.
That's really helpful, thank you. I just wanted to pick up a couple of questions that were in the Q&A box. And there's one about that sort of quite interesting around, and you touched on it there, Sandra, you're getting people to think about the change, different roles. How do you try and contextualize this or position this for staff? Because I think people want to upskill and reskill. Sometimes it's hard to know which of the areas I want to focus on, but actually sometimes it's the why should I question. And I just wonder if Sandra, you might kick off on that. I might ask Duncan as well, given that sort of Duncan referred to the change that Lloyds is going through, how you position some of these things.
Sure. A few years ago, I think very much linked to our own people strategy within the bank, we announced a number of commitments. So this is our commitments to colleagues in terms of what the deal is to work here, not just about how you get paid at a point in the month, but what other things makes it a really good deal to work in NatWest. And one of those was around how we develop colleagues and the importance of that, and anchored it around those 10 future skills as well. And I think making commitments like you've got 2 days to develop these skills is really important. And it's not just about making you better at your current job, but very much about the future as well, and painting that picture that things are changing in the world of work. Things are changing at a rapid pace, and people can see that very clearly. So this is the bank's, I suppose, contract or way of commitment to colleagues, that we can develop you in those ways.
Okay. Duncan.
Yes. So the why is super important, but it's only sort of comes to life really when you make it real for individuals. So certainly organisationally can talk about the importance of skills and how things are changing and so forth. So we're working really hard to think about how do we bring this life at a very practical level, thinking about the symbolic action. So like others on the call, what can we do to sort of demonstrate our commitment to skills progression, whether it's time to grow or other interventions. Then you need to think about how do we recognise, how do we tell stories and so forth. So it's hard yards, to be sure, and it's something that you just have to keep on going at. So a mixture of symbols, stories, and tangible things, I think, are the things that unlock for individuals. What does it mean for me, as opposed to, I get organisationally and in the world things are changing, but usually you have to bring it down to a very low level.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Can I so change in tack, but again, I think in the chat Q&A box is questions about apprenticeships, and obviously we referred in the report to a reduction in number of apprentices in the sector this year compared to last year. And Cameron, you talk about a data apprentice. I just wonder what colleagues think there is behind that reduction in number of apprentices, and actually where are you finding the apprenticeship levy, apprenticeship structure working well for your organisations? Perhaps Cameron, I might ask you that first.
I'm afraid I don't know much about the levy, etc. But in terms of the apprenticeship and the recognition that we need to bring in those new skills, as I say, breaking away from doing the traditional type of apprenticeship we would normally bring into this business, and then setting up one round data. And in actual fact, the selection process we did for all of the apprentices on any of those pathways was a data task. We had them using analytic tools to perform a task, present data, etc., because we knew that was a very strong skill we needed them to be able to demonstrate. So hopefully this data path will prove to be successful, and then we'll expand it in future years.
That's helpful. Thanks, Cameron. Sarah.
Yeah. So you know, we're in the year of general elections, so we may be seeing changes to the apprenticeship levy, and I'm sure many of the people on today would welcome some reform or changes, because I think potentially the reason that we're seeing a decline is because of the rigidness around the levy. And you know, everybody always quotes, well, we have to have 20% off the job learning, and that takes people away from different things. So let's hope we're doing some lobbying at Aviva to try to see if we can to create some change. And you know, we could look at doing that collectively across the industry to have a bit more bargaining power. It's interesting though, because at Aviva our numbers are not declining. Actually, we've gone from utilising 33% of our apprenticeship levy pot to 60%, so we've nearly doubled it, and we've got another 220 grads and apprentices joining us in September. That's in addition to the 450 apprentices that we've already got at Aviva. So we're actually accelerating our apprenticeships. We do think that they're like the future for us. We've partnered with Decoded to develop the first product owner apprenticeship. So that's going to be available. We know that their roles at lots more organisations are going to need, not just Aviva. So we thought that that was really useful. Apprentices do tend to be more sticky in terms of retention. And they're also really helping us in support of our DE&I agenda. So for us, it's a complete no-brainer to push more on that, but recognise that that's not necessarily the same for everybody because of the inflexibility of the levy.
But Sarah, just to pause for your success in increasing your utilisation of the levy, what's driven that? How have you done that? Well,
concerted efforts and clear alignment to future skills. So rather than just saying like anybody can do an apprenticeship, there's all these ones available, like being really clear on like Sandra at NatWest, we went out with our 6 future skills, and being really clear that we have apprenticeships to support all of them. And as part of the Foundry as well, with the rapid reskilling that we did, we've tagged on apprenticeships as a follow-on to continuous learning as well. And of course, the normal like exec sponsorship, clear sponsorship from the top that this is important, will always help to drive change.
That's really helpful. One of our members in the insurance sector, Sarah, is up at I think over 80%.
Don't see, but we are actually looking at something quite exciting that we're hoping to launch by the end of the year that would probably take us to 100%, because it would really change what we do in our customer areas around apprenticeships. So there's definitely more to go after. But yeah, the point for us is not to chase a levy target. It's to be really outcome focused.
Absolutely.
But you can measure it with the levy utilisation, of course. It's a good measure. Yeah,
absolutely. Sandra. You're going to say 100%, aren't you?
No, I'm not. Absolutely, I'm not. Don't worry, but I'm really interested, Sarah, to hear what you're planning there, because it sounds really exciting. I mean, I resonate with everything that Sarah has said there. The only build I think I would add to that is how we partner with other organisations on this. So one of our greatest success in NatWest has been the partnership that we have with Leadership Through Sport and Business, and that has really paid us dividends in terms of our apprentices. Our experience is the same as Aviva. So we have seen an increase in both our graduate, apprentices and intern intake over the last number of years. Maybe, you know, COVID years maybe had an impact on that, but actually even looking before that, we're definitely seeing the increase there. And all business areas are pointing towards the early career programs as being critical in terms of bringing in that skill, bringing in that diversity into the businesses.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I'll do one last question. I asked Duncan this, and it's come up in the chat box. So we talk about apprentices. Often we think about those as people at the start of their career. You know, one of the themes in our People and Technology report was multi-generational workforce. How do you think about upskilling and reskilling for that multi-generational workforce?
Very good question. So we actively promote apprenticeships within the organisation. So to some of the earlier comments, I don't think our numbers have changed materially, but the types of schemes we're offering and the skills and roles that they are there to support are very different to probably a few years ago. But we actively make it available to every single person within the organisation. So we have many people who have been in our branch network serving customers face to face for many, many years. But as we know, customer demand is changing. You know, we haven't got quite the footprint that we used to have, and we need to offer the opportunity. So we're not we don't necessarily target specific generational parts of our workforce. We offer it more on a universal basis and actively encourage anybody to take opportunity of what we offer.
Right, that's good. I'm going to try and wrap this up, so I'm conscious we've got 2 minutes left. There are some questions in the Q&A box, but I think what we might do is, where we got specific answers from the Commission team, we'll circulate those afterwards. I think just 3 points I just want to make in wrapping up. The discussion we've just had really sort of draws out one of the key things we do at the Commission. That's to help share best practice. And I'm very grateful to Duncan, to Sandra, to Sarah, and to Cameron for sharing what they've done in their firms. And I think that is very helpful to those who are on this journey and want to learn what works well in other places. We're thinking quite hard about how the Commission takes forward some of these issues. So one of the big messages that came out from our People and Technology report was around the skills-based organisation, which I know a number of firms are implementing, and that clear link between skills and strategy that was brought out earlier on, Sandra, in the context of empathy. We need to do more work, I think, on sharing a framework for skills-based organisations across the sector, but also looking at some of the knotty challenges that presents as you start to implement that. And I think the third thing, and that just reflects the discussion we've had on the levy, is one of the roles of the Commission, and something we'll focus on, particularly in an election year, is how we represent the needs of the sector around skills to government. Sometimes that's in terms of engagement on policy, but also the input we've had from Frank today was based on thinking how do we try to create that better alignment between what the sector is looking for and what government can do to help. So we want to be the voice of the sector on skills with government, and that's a piece of work we'll continue on over the next few months. But thank you to all our panelists today. Thank you to everyone who's joined it, but a big thank you to the team at the Commission for the launch of what is another great report. So thanks very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.